All right, everyone. Right now, my keyboard here, my fuzzy one, is trying to caress the microphone, so keep that in mind. You may hear odd sounds. It's the cat. We got to talk about what the Democrats are doing right now. Oh my God, they're fucking crazy. They're blocking the stimulus. You know, the stimulus that Trump wanted to give Americans. Pelosi tinkered with a little bit. So the House tinkered with it, and now it's been killed in the Senate. It was a 47-47 vote. It was basically partisan. I think a few people weren't there because of coronavirus specifically. It'll probably pass in the future. Once everything blows over, the problem is once it blows over, you don't need the stimulus. So they're going to need to get their ass in gear. Some Democrats are going to have to be mature and vote for it. I personally think that they shouldn't even bother to take senators and House members and stuff and quarantine them. Let them all get coronavirus. Most of them are old. And then we can have a really great political season. We can get rid of some of the shitty politicians. We can get rid of some of these people in D.C. It's like D.C. goes on a complete quarantine lockdown. It's the one place that most Americans would probably like to be infected more. I'm being slightly tongue-in-cheek when I say that. There's some good, like Rand Paul is in court. He has coronavirus. Thankfully, it's an asymptomatic case. I like the dude. He's one of the few people in the Senate that makes sense. He's also one of the few people in the Senate that's not elderly, so maybe there's a link between those two. The cat is being goofy here. Anyway, I think the danger involved with blocking this stimulus by saying, well, it doesn't have enough about climate change in it. Literally, like the Democrats are trying to institute climate change language in the stimulus bill because they know this is a must-pass. If they don't pass it, eventually at some point the voters, by the way, are going to throttle them in the election. They're trying to institute like unemployment benefit stuff, and it's like, dude, this is a simple stimulus for a simple problem. The simple problem is this. A lot of businesses have shut down, and short term, that will remain the case. Nobody is going to command all of the U.S. economy to be shut down for months and months at a time. So when they say, well, when Bernie Sanders says, we need to give $2,000 a month to every American during this crisis. So you're saying for a month or so, because that's how long the actual crisis in the economic sense would last. This is not meant to address the virus itself. This addresses the economic impact of the virus. That's why it also mentions businesses. When people say, well, this is a slush fund for Trump's corporate buddies. What are you talking about? The element of the stimulus that's being blocked right now has to do with giving individual Americans checks, giving them free shit, essentially. Giving them essentially a 1 month supply of money, which actually for a lot of Americans would probably pay most of the bills for 2 months. That's what this is. This isn't meant to be a long-term proposal, and it's not meant to be a coronavirus response in the more direct sense. It's not going to stop anyone from being infected. If anything, actually, it could have that effect in the following way. People who might otherwise be tempted to go do some sort of work because they're running out of money will have money and won't have to do that. Okay, so that's definitely a benefit of it. But in general, the bill is literally just to allow them to get by for the short term because that's how long you can shut down the U.S. economy. You cannot keep every bar, every restaurant, public gatherings, travel, air travel, all of this stuff, trains, you can't keep it all shut down forever. It would cause a Great Depression. And other countries are going to have to deal with this too. These lockdown-style quarantine methods need to be seen as a temporary measure to allow us to ramp up production of masks and chloroquine and to try to develop a vaccine. That's really what we need to be doing right now. We also need to keep in mind a significant proportion of the people that get sick don't even have symptoms. Most of those that die are already out of the workforce. I hate to be brutally economic when I analyze this, but from the economic standpoint, because we're talking about stimulus, is the average person over 70 still part of the workforce? No, that's your retiree age. You've got mostly retirees and people who work part-time and stuff in that age bracket, people over 70. Is a person with a lot of chronic medical conditions in the workforce? No, a lot of them are on disability. Again, I hate to be brutally honest here, but as far as the economic impact of the virus itself, it has almost none, other than the initial panic, the shortages and so forth. People suspending their travel plans, that harms airlines and so forth. By the way, when they say, well, Trump is giving money to corporations, it's a bailout for his buddies, I hate to be the bearer of interventionist bad news here, but if you don't help any of these businesses while you're forcing them to be shut down. If you weren't forcing them, I'd say let the free market handle it. They either choose to be open or to be closed. Totally voluntary, free market, capitalistic, wonderful. If the government is mandating that businesses be shuttered, it should definitely bail them out. Because there's no other alternative. Otherwise, you're basically telling a segment of your economy to fuck off. If we do that, you can look forward to, I don't know, 15, 20% unemployment, maybe 25%, who knows? It'll take us decades to bail ourselves out of that. The free market will fix it. It'll just take a long time. Unfortunately, we've got several bubbles that might blow up in our faces in the meantime as well. If the government is going to act in that fashion, invoking emergency powers, shutting things down, mandatory quarantines, things of that nature, then it's got to be able to, at the same time, compensate for what is doing. Now, of course, I don't really, long-term, I don't even approve of any of these measures being used on a lengthy basis because it's not necessary. That being said, again, if it is imposed, it needs to be ameliorated because it has an on-the-ground effect in the average American. By the way, corporations aren't people, but they are comprised of people. When the corporation fails, the little worker that's making $12 an hour suffers much more than the CEO that gets a golden parachute. We've got to keep that in mind as well. Now, of course, the stimulus elements that are being blocked right now are aimed at the lower class anyway. There's a cutoff at $90,000 income anyway. If you're making more than that, you're not getting any money, mainly because you don't need it. If you're making, between, I think it was, what was the cutoff, 72 to 90 or something like that, then it peters out. That makes sense. If you're making $70,000 a year versus $90,000, there is a considerable difference in the amount that you can afford. And if you're making less than that, then you get the full bailout. You get a certain amount per child as well. On top of that, I think that they should double that myself, but that's just me. This is a temporary measure. This is to make sure people can put food on the table. This is to make sure that the businesses that are still functioning can function at reasonable capacity because people have the money to buy things. That's the other part. The small businesses that aren't impacted, a grocery store, they're saying, well, the clerks should be considered to be, indispensable or something like in emergency situations. Things like that. If people run out of money, who's going to be buying the food? Well, then they might as well close. And then a bunch of clerks are not being employed at the moment. And the Democrats don't even want to give them a stimulus. Now, as far as the on-the-ground political impact, imagine the optics. Trump is supposedly evil and far right. He's trying to give people, what they will conceive of, perception-wise, as free money. Most of the people in the United States approve of the method. And the Democrats are blocking it. Schumer is rambling about climate change. Pelosi rambling about unemployment benefits and things of that nature. None of these things actually need to be in the bill. You can pass a clean bill, and here's what I would say to the Republicans. Take the same bill that you just put forward and put it forward again. Make it clear we're not negotiating on this. You want to have a separate bill we negotiate on for these other measures, fine. Right now, we just need to get some money into American people's pockets. Pass a clean bill over and over and let the Democrats hang themselves politically if they stand in the way. Don't negotiate at all. Don't allow any attachments. Don't allow any riders. A completely clean bill. Let them negotiate separately for the rest and make it clear to the American people if you intend to use that particular political strategy, you need to make it very clear. McConnell and Trump and the others will have to come out and tell the American people live, preferably in a major State of the Union, an emergency address. We're trying to get the money to you. We want a clean bill. We're not going to dick around about it anymore. The time has come for the grown-ups to make the decisions. And cast the Democrats off as petulant, whiny little babies, which is technically true. Cast them off that way and say, look, we're willing to entertain all these other proposals, but it needs to be a clean, one-time bill in the meantime as a stopgap against economic Armageddon. That's what the Republicans should do. Now, does McConnell have the intelligence and finesse to do this? I don't know that he does. He's really great as far as Senate maneuvers go, as far as the strategy on the floor as the leader of the Senate. That being said, as far as public addresses, PR, optics, more on the mediocres, more like a John Boehner sort of figure, I'd suppose. Okay, a little bit better than Boehner. Boehner would break down and start crying randomly. I thought that was hysterical, by the way, at the time. We need a clean bill. And by the way, I oppose the concept of stimulus, but if you're going to have government intervening to shut things down, it also is going to have no choice but to intervene to keep things afloat. At least short term. And these have got to be short term. When Trump alludes to the fact that in a couple of weeks he'll make a decision whether to keep doing this, the decision should be no. We can't do this any longer term. you will collapse the U.S. economy. The problem is, at that point, even Trump's particular acumen, which is largely money, he's a money man, will not be enough to save the economy. We will go into a recession. Well, that would be something I would not look forward to. I don't think we need a recession. By the way, he'd be handing victory to people like Bill Maher on a golden platter. He'd probably still get reelected, but he'd be reigning over an economy that would be in shambles, and we'd have to claw our way back up to where we were before. It's not necessary. This epidemic is not Armageddon. And if you're going to address, again, the purely fiscal side, you have to get past the good feelings and good vibrations bullshit of hippiedom, and you have to get past thinking about it in medical terms altogether. You have to think about the impact on the economy. That's what I would say as a libertarian. I don't want the government intervening. If I had a bar and the government told me you can't operate it, I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? That makes absolutely no goddamn sense whatsoever. Not unless there's another black plague to deal with or something that's, a little bit more substantial than the death rates we're currently seeing. I would tell them to fuck off. I'd be inclined to refuse. I'd be inclined to sue. That being said, if that is going to happen, you will need another layer of interventionism temporarily in order to prevent that bar from being permanently closed by going out of business. And the Democrats' bill altogether would help employees, but it wouldn't help the employers. The problem is the additions that they're seeking, those that have anything to do with the outbreak or the economic stuff that's going on. Some of it has to do with climate change. It shouldn't be addressed at all. It has nothing to do with coronavirus, and it has absolutely nothing to do with economic Armageddon, except that it's a waste of your time and money. If you're going to impose these things that the Democrats are promoting right now, it won't keep an employer from going belly up. It'll just it just means when they do go belly up, then the employees will get a temporary bailout, but they'll still be unemployed. You'll still have collapsed, you cracked the spine of the economy. So it's a terrible idea. The Democrats' proposal makes no economic sense whatsoever. That's about all. Peace out.